Lovely, thank you very much. So I'm really pleased to be here having a quick chat with you this evening about the guidelines for the use of airborne laser scanning in archaeology. As Ikshma already mentioned, this has been a project that's been on the go for the past 3 years now, and many of the people who've contributed to it are in the room this evening, and it's really lovely to see you all. So tonight, what I'm going to do for yourselves is run through kind of the aims and origins of the guidelines. So how do we get to producing them? What was the need that was identified within the community across Europe? We're going to talk a little bit about how to use the guidelines, so what they actually contain now they've been brought together in their final form, thinking about the key topics. I'll run you through a section summary so that you know sort of what's in. I think even for those who contributed towards the guidelines, this could be quite useful because lots of people looked at lots of different things during that process of bringing it all together. But now we have that final document. I think it's helpful to know where everything finally landed in that structure. And then just think a little bit about what the document means and how it could be implemented into good practice for us as professionals as we move forward, integrating LiDAR and increasingly into our work. So what were the aims of the guidelines? Well, what we wanted to do was bring together for the first time a reference document that captured the experience of how people were using LiDAR across Europe in lots of different contexts and different ways. We recognised, having done a community survey, that there was a real need for a document that put in one place all the understanding and the learning that we'd gathered from using LiDAR for more than a decade now. And Nicholas was really kind. He said I'd used it for several years. It's been a very long time. I'm just aging well. When it comes to it. And so having gone through that process of doing a PhD kind of 15 years ago now, it's amazing to see how well integrated these data have become in so many different aspects of what we do as professionals. But it can be quite difficult to access that experience, that professional knowledge. So what we wanted to do was work together to bring these guidelines to fruition, but also to build a bit of a network of people who had experience, so they knew each other and knew who to ask if they wanted to get advice or to bounce ideas together. So the guidelines in themselves are a fantastic achievement, but they are also testament to this power of bringing people together in a shared space, in this case Zoom. And maybe actually the only benefit of the pandemic was the fact that everybody was so familiar with working online that we were able to have these collaborative co-author sessions and discussions entirely on Zoom, which made them really accessible. More accessible than if, for example, we tried to run an in-person seminar or an in-person couple of days to be able to hash out the same content. So, having undertaken that survey from the community as a guideline as to what people wanted and needed, 49 authors worked collaboratively, designing both the structure and the content of the guidelines together. As I mentioned, it was a couple of years in progress bringing this together. The survey that we undertook of more than 100 individuals and 30 different organisations from across Europe was done in 2022. We wanted to understand the status quo for the use of ALS by heritage professionals, and we also asked what guiding documents were currently being used and how, so that we could understand the needs and aspirations were with respect to integrating ALS into wider work. We cover all aspects of the process of integrating ALS, as I'll come on to today, right the way through from the acquisition and collection and data and project management aspects at the very start, the very inception of a project, all the way through to integration of results with communities, being able to engage the wider public in not just the LiDAR data, but the results of it and their understanding of the cultural heritage that is around them and is for them, and for them to know about. So how do we anticipate people will use the guidelines? Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can dive into the material. The guidelines are something like 158 pages long. There's an awful lot of material in there. So it's quite important to share some information, I think, up front about how you might choose to use them. So, as you would expect, they would provide a single how-to guideline. You could read them from start to finish, and that would enhance your knowledge widely across the whole topic area of integration of airborne laser scanning for historic environment work. You can also use the information in case studies to inform good practice and as teaching tools if you're involved in sharing that information out, both with your colleagues, but perhaps you're in a more formal learning environment, or maybe you work with local communities and helping them to understand their heritage. And increasingly, the large amount of LiDAR data that is available to people free of charge from national data collections. We also intended that the guidelines would be both broad and deep, so that you can dive into particular topics that would be useful. So if you want to know about, say, point density and spacing, if you want to understand what the career paths for somebody who is a specialist in LiDAR data within the historic environment sector, or perhaps how to visualize your data, well, we've got all of these different aspects covered. There's an awful lot of information captured here within the guidelines. And you can use the different sections and the structure of the sections to jump to the relevant parts within that airborne laser scanning life cycle, as I'll show you in the next couple of slides. And then finally, we wanted to provide guidance for specific applications. So these might be environmental or context specific, such as planning, archaeology, and integrating LiDAR into the development control systems. So in the final section, we've got specific applications and guidance for those, and the information in that section does heavily rely on the preceding sections. So users are really advised to make use of those cross-references throughout the document so that they can flesh out the information within these case studies with the rest of the guidelines information. We also wanted this to be very practical and very useful. So as a result, there are structures within the guidelines that help people to put the information that they're gathering through this reading, this intellectual exercise of, absorbing data through the written word into their processes and their decision making. So, for example, there are several sections which include workflows to help with decision making and understanding how to integrate. So this one, for example, shows how ALS data assessment can be integrated into the development control process. And we also produce a series of printables as part of the document. So here, for example, you've got an archived LiDAR data assessment check sheet, which is designed to help guide you through those steps of understanding what exactly is in your LiDAR data archive, how it might be useful, and make sure that you've got that covering information against your data before you use it to make for good project management and for excellent data collection and archiving at the end of your project. So thinking about the structure of the kind of life cycle of airborne laser scanning within archaeological projects and how that is reflected in the structure of the guidelines. So broadly, we would consider there to be 4 phases. So the first phase around data acquisition, the collection of that LiDAR data. The second being the processing of the data and the derivation of products such as the terrain models and visualizations. The third phase is around archaeological interpretation. So that's, the meat and excitement of the matter for many people within our sector. Although, of course, there are some absolute data nerds like myself who happily sit in the first 2 sections as well. And then finally, the phase of dissemination and archiving, which is also hugely important, but sometimes not necessarily overlooked, but perhaps under-supported within the projects that we see ALS in the heritage sector. And we wanted to make sure that the guidelines included good practice across all of these phases of integration. So within the first section of the guidelines, that's the ALS technology and data acquisition section, that covers phase 1. Section 2 very much focuses on phases 2 and 3 of that integration cycle. So data processing and interpretation together as part of that. Section 3 of the guidelines looks at reporting and archiving phase 4. And then, as I've already mentioned, section 4 looks at applications and management considerations. So specific case studies and cases that you might want to have as standalone cases that we can look at and help us to build our understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to run through very quickly, section by section, to give you some examples of the sort of things that are within those sections, so you've got an idea of what you might be looking for and how to dive through the data. So in our first section, you'll find tips on how to use the guidance document. So there's sort of how to navigate your way around, an introduction to laser scanning technology. So how does it all work? And a quick reference guide illustrating those stages that I've just talked about. So what is the technology and how do we integrate it into the projects that we've got? We also look at a deep dive regarding the required parameters for ALS survey and what would be considered to be good practice in terms of commissioning data. As I've already mentioned, we provide a series of useful resources, including that check sheet that you've already seen around using archive data. So not just the acquisition of new data, but also looking at reusing archive data to best effect. And within this case study, within this chapter, there is also a case study on the use of ALS for heritage management in coastal environments. On to section 2, which is all around data processing and interpretation. What can you expect to find in that section? Well, as you'd expect, information about the best practice in data processing and visualization is right up there with one of the key things that people wanted to see as form part of these guidelines. But there's also quite a heavy emphasis on the interpretation, on guidance around the interpretation of archaeological features. So not just the creation of useful imagery, beautiful imagery from the LiDAR data, but also how we can make best use of that for archaeological and cultural heritage aims. We were also able to share example schema for the vectorization of features. So really that deep dive again into the practicalities of how to do this work, how to vectorize features, how to present those to the wider public. In this section also includes an introduction to the topics of automated detection and citizen science. So these are areas that are increasingly important within our sphere, and the automated detection, there's a good range of publications, but I think sometimes people can feel quite overwhelmed perhaps with the amount of information, the technical nature of that information. So we wanted to be able to really break that down into the key principles to help inform everybody. And I think it's important to mention at this stage that while we have tried to give a reasonable depth around each of these topics, in order to keep it accessible, what we have done is provided that overview with resources and information and references that you can then access beyond it. So this is not intended to be the full one-stop shop. You won't know absolutely everything about automated detection by reading these chapters, but what you will have is a really solid overview and the signposts to go off and find more information, and importantly the people that you should be speaking to. You'll be able to network into those professionals who are doing this at the kind of bleeding edge of this sort of research, so that you know who to ask and where to go for that help. We also talk really important aspect that was reflected back to us in the survey of sort of EAC members and associations back in 2022, was how to integrate the information from ALS survey and interpretation to fieldwork. So we have brought that together and again provided a resource with a summary table so that you can cross-reference against the different sorts of archaeological interventions and fieldwork interventions that would be most complementary, and how to do that. So providing ideas and a way forward. Remembering that these are guidelines, they're not strict rules for the application of ALS, but they are to provide different pathways that you can leverage and that you can take advantage of for your projects. So yeah, as I've said, integrating the ALS data with complementary fieldwork methods and example schemas for collecting field observations to go along. And then finally, wrapping up this section, we have a chapter about the sort of skill and expertise of staff and the competencies matrix. And this is designed to help support the professional development of people within the sector. I do apologise, my bullet points have gone a little awry here, so they're a little bit untidy. But the idea of this final chapter is thinking about how many of us are working within the sector, working with these specific types of data, and what the roles involved within the management of ALS within archaeological projects look like. Are you a technical person? Are you a project manager? Where do you need that skills blend in order to be successful in your aims? So what specific skills are you looking for to build a team that can use ALS data to best effect for cultural heritage work? So that's section 2. There's a lot in there, as you'd expect, because it covers 2 full phases of that ALS life cycle, as I mentioned before. So moving on to section 3, really critical section here. So a lot of this section is focused on the good management, good practice for data management. So ensuring that the data that you are collecting and using is fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Really thinking about the principles of where digital data and ALS projects fit within that. So there's advice on content and structure of reports. So if you're thinking about, coming to this for the first time, how should I integrate my work into a wider report that I can then disseminate and archive? There's information there about how to meet national and regional standards with respect to that. There are good practice examples for the presentation of ALS-derived data. And there are also guidance on the process of archiving data, including things like data formats, what should we be using, and what the current standards for digital data that are expected are. We talk a lot in this section, or I'll give a lot of information in this section about metadata and paradata. So that's the data that supports the information, the actual data that you're archiving. And of course, this is really important if you ever want to be able to reuse your data in terms of the metadata, but also the paradata about how your project itself was organized and structured and run and coordinated, so that people can come along and understand what it was you did, how and why, and therefore take best advantage of it. I think it's really important to note that with the increasing accessibility of LiDAR data and the temporal nature of collecting, year on year, as some countries are, or some areas in particular are, that ability to go back and reassess, reprocess, rework data is going to become more and more pertinent. And that can only really be done if we are collecting the associated metadata and paradata to archive it with. And then finally, within this section, there's guidance and ideas for dissemination and public outreach, including technical topics, sort of the explanation of technical topics to diverse audiences. So how do we make ourselves clear when we want to share information in an appropriate way that allows other people to access these data and also the heritage data associated with it? Now, finally, section 4, application and management considerations. So in this section, we've got guidance for specific applications of ALS data, including planning and landscape management, integration with cultural heritage records, geoarchaeological applications, applications of change monitoring, 3D visualization, and automated feature detection here as well. Within these applications, there's a lot of detail, a lot of information. It really is a kind of go-to resource, I think, for those of you who are interested in finding out about these particular applications of ALS data. It's a great starting point. I've already mentioned that we have some case studies and special topics, and these are peppered through the guidance, in part because they're really interesting and they help to kind of break the technical nature of the text, but also because it encourages people to look through to different sections and sort of build that knowledge base as they're going through. So all of the sections are complemented by the following case studies and special topics. So I've mentioned the coastal environments. We also have one on agricultural environments, forested and woodland, integration with the World Heritage Convention, integration with building information modelling and restoration systems, automatic detection of archaeological features, and wetland environments. So these are key study areas which were highlighted as being challenging applications, areas where it might not be so obvious how ALS could be integrated, or there were particularly complicating environmental factors that we wanted to highlight and to bring out, and that our community asked for more information and resource about. So having rattled through all that, I bet you're pleased that you recorded it so you can go back and listen to it at half speed. What these guidelines are not. So these guidelines are a collection of good practice. They're based on current evidence and experience from the contributors. We've tried really hard to make sure that there is a range of experiences, so different regions and different situations are represented within the document and within the case studies. However, they shouldn't be seen as a prescriptive set of rules. It's not intended to be exhaustive. We hope that readers will take the guidance and feel that they are informed users and clients. That's the aim of having this information at your fingertips. And as I've already mentioned, it's that network of specialists that built the document, gives the readers an idea of who they can contact for further assistance, who knows what about what, and how can we build this quite disperse community into a helpful network for people who are currently working using ALS, but also people who might want to start using it as part of their projects. I think one of the things that really struck me when we did the original survey was quite how isolated some ALS practitioners are within the historic environment sector. We certainly had examples where there was perhaps one person in a region, and even a couple where there was maybe one person within a country that was really doing this sort of work in a kind of a daily and meaningful way. And of course, that's quite an isolating situation to be in. It's always helpful to be able to springboard ideas off other people. So the network is as powerful as the guidelines themselves, I would say. And then finally, really a word on currency. So where we expect to see rapid change and growth in ideas, so for example, artificial intelligence applications and geospatial formats, particularly those two have been highlighted as areas within the guidelines that we expect to see quite rapid change. We've tried to highlight that within the text as best we can. So understanding that this is very much a kind of point in time that we're reflecting back. What I would say on that point is that anybody who's interested is really encouraged to join their relevant special interest groups, such as the Aerial Archaeological Research Group, because that's where you're going to see the release notes about these changes coming to the fore as they happen. It's where you're going to keep up to date. At the moment, there are no plans for a kind of re-release schedule or a redo of these guidelines per se, but the EAC are very interested and very pleased with the way in which they have been taken up, as evidenced by the number of downloads to date so far. So there is always the possibility of revising particularly different sections of the document. Of course, that's made a lot easier by the fact that the publication is a digital format. It's a PDF download, which does allow us to go back in and revise things as things change. However, there isn't a set budget or a timescale for that, so there's no promises that will happen. So that is everything that I wanted to say, and I'm really, really happy to take questions from the floor that anybody has about any section of it. But before I do that, I just want to say again my kind of unending thanks to the people that contributed and made the guidelines possible. Really, all I did was host a series of Zoom sessions and brought together this incredible wealth of information across our sector and across all these great professionals bringing their experience to bear. And particular thanks actually to Dave, who was the co-editor on this project, because as you can imagine, having had so many authors and so many brilliant ideas and different ways of expressing things, to bring that back into a single coherent document was quite some task. So I'm really grateful for his efforts and experience within that. So on that point, I'm going to stop talking. And I hope that Lukasz will now unmute you all so that you can ask any questions that you have.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was really excellent. Just give me a second, and I will allow everyone to unmute themselves should they wish to. Yeah, so this should be done now. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we will sort this out that way. We've got 25 people with us today, so I'm sure there will be some questions there to Rebecca. Right. Okay. I guess everyone is a little bit shy now, or they are all gone, except for Sarah, who we can see. But
Everyone else has fallen to sleep. They've fallen off their
indeed,
perch.
indeed, it's been a long day, I'm sure, for all of us. Rebecca, you mentioned that there are no plans right now to do a re-release for the EAC guidelines, but I assume that at some point there will be an update to this document. So, given that it's been over a month since the release, have you got any feedback? What's been perhaps missing in the guidelines, or we could do differently?
No, is the honest answer to that. I think people are probably still downloading, digesting, diving in. I'm really open for those kind of suggestions as well, and I think that hopefully people would know where to send them, how to contact us to do that. Um, I'd like to think that we've covered off most bases fairly well, simply by the way that these guidelines were generated. So starting with that European-wide community survey of what's the current status quo and what do you need. Um, so no, I haven't received any specific feedback of things that were glaring oversights. But if you find one, I'm willing to hear it.
Of course, yes. You can always, if you our participants, and I mean our participants today, have any feedback about this, you can ping an email direct to Rebecca or to me at arcchair@gmail.com, and I will forward this to the editors, of course. By this I mean Rebecca and Dave, who should be there somewhere with us as well. Any questions from the floor? Dave has. Oh, Dave was there for a second.
He almost said
Yeah,
hello.
we'll say hello. There's Dave.
Dinner, and I thought it was safe to switch the video back on again.
Right.
I
Okay.
guess, I mean, my question to the floor, who's downloaded it and read it and used it? Has anybody sort of got their hands on it and used it in anger yet? And if so, what are your thoughts about it? I should just say that more than 3,000 downloads so far in the month since it was released, which is at least 2 orders of magnitude greater than the usual download rate for EAC guidelines. So I think that alone has demonstrated the demand for it. And even within the first 24 hours before we'd actually officially told anybody that it was there and available, people were finding it on the Zenodo archive and downloading it. So hopefully that means that it's meeting a need.
No, I think this is the by the number of downloads and how this has been received on various social media, I believe that this has been a very successful publication so far.
Oh, I never read the comments on social media, so
Oh, right.
hopefully it's a good thing.
Good.
But yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say congrats, guys, because when it all started, we knew who we should put to coordinate all the things. So we knew that Rebecca is going to do a good job. So that was not the question. But okay, there was actually lots of people contributing, and it looked like quite a chaos at one point. So to see it now out and to see it the way it is, it's really great. So just congrats to you guys, to Rebecca and Dave.
And yeah, and thanks to everybody who persisted kind of through the chaos moments of making this collaborative effort work. I appreciate that it's not necessarily a common way of pulling together this sort of guidance. So I'm really glad that our experiment worked, and I do think it has worked. I think it's allowed a greater range of voices to contribute to it, and then hopefully a set of guidelines that are more relevant as a consequence.
Yes, I mean even the number of participants, even number of authors in this book. I mean almost 50 authors from representing perspectives from over 30 countries. This has been amazing, and it allows so and because of that, the publication touches on so many different aspects of LiDAR that it is a really go-to resource for teaching, as Matt Oki says in the chat window. And we encourage you to share it with your colleagues who are doing teaching at universities, and also provide training to heritage professionals. And while we are on this, Rebecca, I know that we also have plans to help people in various countries adjust or maybe use those guidelines in their own national context. Could you tell us more about that?
So there's not really a formal plan, but it always was an aspiration of the sort of network that we've built behind the guidelines to look at them as the starting point for more specific guidance where needed, where required. So an example of that might be through the Association of Local Government Archaeologists here in the UK, wanting to use the section on development control, which is, broadly applicable, we feel, sort of across region, and think about how that would be the starting point for more specific guidance that would be relevant to regional legislation. So that's one example. We're really open to helping building that. On the kind of more generic level, these slides are going to be made available as part of the pack on Zotero. So people, sorry, not Zotero, Zenodo. So people who are accessing the resource will also be able to access this slide pack, and that might help when you're teaching or introducing people to the guidelines, to give them that sort of the pathway through, the introduction to them. If you don't want to just point them in the direction of this video and have me harping on for half an hour or so.
Yes, and I'm also looking at all those various participants in this call representing different countries who could help us to adjust those guidelines and this pack to make it align with the local regulations and rules.
Yeah. So I think there are two aspects that I would like to see happen. One, the kind of adjustment and development on, so this is sort of the guidelines plus, taking particular aspects of them and building through and developing more specific examples and guidance, but also the translation, if necessary, of the overview, so that we can reach audiences that perhaps wouldn't be as comfortable accessing these materials in English as they are at the moment, so that we can sort of at least be able to describe and explain what the contents of the guidelines are, for those who might otherwise find it a little bit overwhelming to have such a large document kind of plonked onto their desktop. And certainly anybody who is interested in helping us to do that kind of translation of overview. There are no plans to translate the whole document, but that translation of the overview materials, I think, could help us to reach wider audiences within the heritage sector.
Could I just ask a question?
Of course,
Yes,
Stephen.
on you go, Stephen.
I'll just put the video on there. I've directed at the panel here just to see whoever could pick up on it. I've been involved in archaeological research for about 30 years in Northern Ireland, although I live in Austria now. We finished a project. We've identified dozens and dozens of sites through aerial archaeology, but for 3 years we have been doing an intertidal survey, which has identified not one site, but several, maybe up to 10 sites that all seem to be connected, early medieval sites. We can only take that research, we can identify them from aerial photography and stuff. We can look at historical documents, local newspapers, local knowledge, but there comes a point where we come to a stop, and that's where the Lidar survey would come in. Unfortunately, Lidar surveys are not cheap. Is there any funds available if we could show up front, we know what we're sitting with. We're sitting with a very important early medieval landscape here. We've identified the features. There's a few things we can't see with tree cover, but we suspect that we're looking at a Norse Viking enclosure. There's other features to go along with it. There's too many features to go along with it, even written evidence that puts them in the exact spot from a good historical source.
Sorry.
Sorry, Rebecca.
No, it's okay. So I was going to cut in there and say, kind of my starting point recommendation for you would be the first chapter of the guidelines, because that's what's going to steer you towards what archive resources are available. Now, forgive me, I'm not so familiar with, nobody could be familiar with the data that's available for every single area, but what might be available in archive in terms of LiDAR captured for other purposes that might cover your area already. So that's one thing to look at.
No.
And then also the guidance about how you might acquire in ways that could be cost effective. So yes, LiDAR has or ALS survey has a reputation for being expensive, but with the increasing use of drone mounted LiDAR systems, it's actually increasingly cost effective to be able to capture data in that way. And for specific sites, such as the case that you've highlighted, where you haven't necessarily got blanket vegetation cover, but you've got specific sites where you would benefit from it. I think reading through the advice that's in here around drone LiDAR and then that giving you the starting point for putting together a funding bid. And what I would say is, having done a lot of community archaeology projects based on LiDAR data, that it is always a hook for funding bodies such as the Lottery Fund, because they see it, they're quite happy for you to spend that initial outlay collecting data, because it's really clear how engaging that's going to be for the local community and what benefits that's going to have for them. So I suppose to that end, and again, I can't speak to the specific funding situation where you are, but I know that that's been a really important hook for organisations within England and Wales to get that core data to start with and use it for, you know, the enhancement of the archaeological record, but also to enhance the way that people can interact with their landscapes and understand the heritage of the place that they live.
Yeah, the evidence is overwhelming. One site's interesting, but when you have associated sites from an early Christian period through to the Norse Viking period, the LiDAR and the technical side of it, the LiDAR and the ground penetrating radar, that's all stuff that's beyond our reach. It's frustrating to have the hardcore evidence there, or as much as you can gather up from sites that were never ever thought about before. And we're certainly up against the wall here at the moment, getting the technical side of it sorted out.
I wonder then if it's the opportunity to look at partnership. So if you feel like that is currently kind of beyond the means of your project as it stands, who can you reach out to partner with respect to that? Could it be somebody who's interested in doing an undergraduate or master's degree, looking at the more technical aspects? I wonder if that might be a way forward if you're feeling like it's beyond where you are.
There is avenues we're looking at, but I say at the moment everything's ground to a halt as far as that's concerned. The thing is, we could actually pinpoint them. We could give them a grid reference and say, go here. And we know roughly what we're going to expect. I'll be in Ireland next week for 10 days. So we're going to maybe do a bit of field walking below the tree cover to see if I can identify what I'm thinking I'm going to see. So I'll maybe get aerial photographs or get photographs below the tree cover and hope I get a good result on that score. But there is a few avenues, but I was just interested to know what your viewpoint would have been on that, Rebecca. But thank you very much.
Well, where's the will, there's a way.
Oh,
And
I know,
there's quite a lot of information within the guidelines that will sort of give you a
We
starting
we never quit. We've been at it 30 years, and we're, as different ones says to us, we're like a dog with a bone. And once we get a hold of it, we're not letting go.
That's very tenacious of you. You have my admiration. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Stephen, for your question. And just wanted to know that even countries in the UK are catching up with the national Lidar, and Scottish national program will kick off hopefully this year. So I hope the Northern Ireland will follow suit shortly. And this time next year, you will get maybe you will get an announcement of that program, hopefully. Right. Okay. Are there any other questions to Rebecca? Any comments? Okay. If no one wants to raise their voice, I will close this meeting. Thank you again, Rebecca, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you for all of your work on the guidelines together with Dave, Rachel, and Chris, of course. But I know that this has been an enormous task to bring almost 50 people, over 50 people together, 49, and that on the authors list. And I'm sure we will all refer back to those guidelines over the next few years. And this is the resource to go for right now when it comes to airborne LiDAR
Any
in archaeology.
questions? Any questions? You all know where to find me. I'm super happy.
Precisely, yes. And of course, I encourage you all to join ARC if you are not members yet, because this is the space to be for all those cool kids working with remote sensing in archaeology and heritage. And ARC, of course, will welcome you because we would like to share our expertise and our skills with you. Thank you all for coming today, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.